I moved to Waterloo, Iowa. I was honored as Man of the Year because besides working full time, I also, I was a chaplain for the JCs and also ran the membership campaign. And of course, we used pornography. We had stag shows, and that's how we increased the membership from 150 to 400 members in that JC chapter. We were dealing with porno films, and we had a girl set up in a room in that. So it was, the thing to do. We were boosting membership from it. So nobody said a word about it. Loving and caring. I've always looked after my children, even now.
What kind of values do you remember imparting to them?
The kind of values?
Were you strict with them too?
No, not as strict as, no. A lot of things that my dad did, I refused to do because I don't believe in hitting children. I don't believe in spoiling a child either. My values are such that if you give enough love to a child.
You're accused of murdering 33 kids, and you say you didn't believe in hitting. I mean,
well, anybody that knows, you see, first of all, you're basing this garbage on what you've heard of me. I was married twice, and just because I didn't get along in the marriages, my marriages went down the drain only because I was workaholic, working 7 days a week in that.
There's that one photograph of you and Rosalind Carter.
Yeah, Mrs. Rosalind Carter. Well, the Secret Service tries to cover it up and said, well, we don't know how he got into the picture. Hell, I was in charge of the reception. I had to stand at the door and let them know which politicians were allowed in and which ones weren't. The thing of it is, but the Secret Service wanted to cover up and make it sound like that I had no business there. I was cleared, and I was with the Secret Service at the time and setting up the parade route and everything, because I used to set up the parades for the Polish Alliance. And then for 3 years in a row, I had set up the parades to run. And, that's a big feat, getting 20,000 Polish people to go in one direction at one time.
On a historical note, your Iowa conviction goes back to what year was that?
1968.
68. And what was, just in a nutshell, without getting in too deeply, what was the basis of the Iowa conviction?
The basis of it was a sodomy conviction. It's the only thing I ever was sentenced to was a sodomy conviction. They're claiming that the state representative's son, who was on the other party, he claims that he was sexually abused by me. And in essence, he was blackmailing me for it. Now, what it boiled down to was oral copulation. And it was consensual. At the time, this young individual made the charge at me. He was blackmailing me. He wanted more and more money. He said, look, I gave you a blowjob. Now you got to pay for this. I said, go see your father. He wasn't getting along with his father. But they came down heavy on me.
When you paroled out, where did you establish your residency?
I was under the interstate compact. I was paroled back to Illinois.
Mm-hmm. And you went to Springfield first, did you not?
No. Directly to Chicago because
Chicago.
I had a job working at Bruno's restaurant. That was a requirement of interstate compact transfer. You had to have a job and a place to stay. I moved in with my mother in the condominium. My dad had just passed away. So I lived with my mother and worked at Bruno's as a chef. When I first got out on parole, for the next 2 years, I stayed with Bruno's restaurant. Mm-hmm. And I worked for them. But on the side, I used to go in at 4 in the morning and get off at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And to me, that was too short of a day, not enough work. So I started doing odd jobs painting. Mm-hmm. And I found that on the weekends, the afternoons and the weekends, I was making more money than I was as a chef, even though I was getting $12-something an hour. Mm-hmm. I borrowed $600 from my mother, and through odd jobs, I left the chef business.
Now, give me kind of just an overview of the business that you eventually established, the construction work. Is this self-taught then, the construction and maintenance work?
I started doing painting, and then I started doing wallpapering and decorating. And inside of 3 years, PDM, which is painting, decorating, and maintenance, was doing $1 million a year.
And that was...
And I only had 4 employees.
And that was the business you were in at the time of the arrests.
That's correct. PDM in 1974 became a corporation, and then I owned PDM Contractors Corporation. I owned PDM Plumbing, PDM Concrete, and PDM Decorating. Mm-hmm. And then I branched off with another partner into Raftco Construction. Mm-hmm. And from there, we were doing strictly drugstores. Mm-hmm. PDM was able to work 52 weeks out of the year, while most construction companies shut down for the winter. I never had time to shut down because I had them on a waiting list. Our business was growing at that rapid rate. The Summerdale house was rented to PDM contractors. Mm-hmm. And like the living room was the front office. Mm-hmm. The dining room of that house was like a boardroom because it was an 8 by 10-foot table with big captain chairs because we use it as a boardroom for meetings. There's a misconception of what the house on Summerdale is. It's not a house where you work 9 to 5 and come home, and it's like a house where you live in. The living room was the private office section. One of the bedrooms was a terrarium. The kitchen was more like a fast food kitchen. I started back in 1984. I started taking 10 milligram of Valium, and by the time 1978 came around, I was doing 130 milligram of Valium. But then I was moving 80 jobs a year, and I was working 16, 18-hour days, and I just had to have something to take the pressure off. The clowning was relaxation for me. I enjoyed entertaining kids. Like some people are, they unwind in different ways, either by going out drinking or that. I could put on clown makeup, and I was relaxed. And I enjoyed doing it. It was only twice a month that I did it.
Yeah, this was not used then for a lure to draw kids to you.
No, we would visit different hospitals and entertain the children there. And we didn't entertain them with handcuffs or anything like that. All we used was balloon animals and small toys and stuff like that. But we also did parades. And in the summertime, like on 4th of July, I used to be in 4 parades in one day. I've always told people when I got into clown makeup, I regressed into childhood. It was fun being a clown because you could be yourself or just let yourself go and act a fool. You could be slapstick and funny and have a good time. That's why I always enjoyed clowning. Clowning has taken a bad name because of what they've used in my case. I used to do clowning, and I don't know if you want to mention the name, for an ice cream company in Chicago who had 33 flavors. I'm serious, Bressler Ice Cream Company. I was their contractor, and I was also their clown. And Pogo the Clown was the clowning that I did for charity hospital work for the Democratic Party and that. And Pogo the Clown is originally. Pogo comes from being Polish and on the go all the time, so it's Pogo.
Why the skeleton?
This was done by request. Somebody requested a skull clown, and mostly the punk rockers and the undergrounders like that stuff there. This is Christ as I see him in myself. And it's monolithic because Christ, to me, is monolithic. He's all things to all people. This here is the Hi-Ho series, and that is self-explanatory. It's the 7 Dwarfs. And they've always stuck to me as a great child painting. And so I've done a series of Hi-Ho series paintings. And this is the 1990 one. This is called Hi-Ho Around the Campfire. It's an original work. Walt Disney is a mentor for me because I've always enjoyed his creativity. And the 7 Dwarfs, if you actually look at all the faces, they represent the 7 different moods that most people can get into.
Yeah, your paintings have improved over the years. I think we've seen some...
I think I've learned from each one of them. I guess it's the same reason why I relate to Michelangelo, because he was a workaholic, and Leonardo da Vinci. People always ask me who my favorite artists are and why. And I did not know that Michelangelo was homosexual. It doesn't make no difference to me. He was a workaholic. He was a sculptor. He was a painter and did a lot of other things. Da Vinci was an inventor in that. And, of course, in my life, I've done painting, decorating, wallpapering. I've done mural work.
Now, they did not search the house at that time or look through the house?
No. According afterwards, they're claiming that they came to the front door of the house and knocked on the door and that I hid from them.
Why didn't you let them in at that time when they were knocking at the front door?
There was no way I could have heard them. I was way in the back of the house, in the rec room, on the telephone. When they finally walked around the side of the house, I could look out the picture window, see them there, because I was on the phone, and they could see me clearly too, sitting on the couch on the telephone, because I was talking to my sister in regards to a death in our family. So I told her that I would call her back, got up, went to the door, and he introduced himself as Kozenzak and Piquel, and they wanted to come in and talk to me about Robert Piest. And I had told him that I had not had any conversation with him, but I said, if you want to talk to me, then come back there. And they wanted me to come down to the police station. Okay, well, I didn't have time because I was doing work for the county and stuff like that. Went into the police station finally on the next day. This was after Kozenzak and Piquel were at the house. They had asked me to come in and give me an account of my whereabouts. The thing of it is that on that same day, they held me there for 9 hours, and while holding me there for 9 hours, they executed a search warrant. The first search warrant was executed on December 13th. That is the search warrant where they claimed they went through the house looking for Robert Piest. It was written up to be looking for Robert Piest, and Robert Piest wasn't there.
The police had focused on you as being the suspect in the missing boy, and eventually...
well, they were following me around.
Following you?
Yeah, constantly. And on December 13th, I had made a statement to the police department, and from that date forward, they had me under surveillance. The only trouble is that the Mickey Mouse way they were doing it, they had 2 cars following me day and night, and they had trouble keeping up with me, so I used to go out to the car in the morning and tell them where I was going, so in case I got lost. Because at the time I was doing 5 construction jobs in 5 parts of the city. So in essence, I was all over the place. But this was like Keystone Cops trying to follow me around. The first search warrant was executed on December 13th. However, what is strange is you had 20 trained officers that came into that house, supposedly went down in the crawl space, crawled around. There was no mounds of dirt, there was no odor, there was no nothing. I never feared anybody going down that crawl space.
Now, when the search warrants were effected in your case, they did find an awful lot in the crawl space of your home, did they not?
Well, yeah, I had offered to sell them the house because I thought there was nothing down in the crawl space.
Yeah.
I had never had any qualms about them going down in the crawl space.
Well, how many bodies were actually located on the property, and where?
To my understanding, there was a total of 29 bodies or 28 bodies were found on the property. 27 of them under the house.
And the rest?
1 was under the driveway, 1 was under the garage. So that makes a total of 29.
Okay. Now, from the standpoint of the arrest, when you were arrested in this matter, it
snowballed.
It snowballed. Okay. What was the date of that arrest? Do you recall?
December 22nd, 1978 is when I was arrested. When I was arrested, they claimed, well, there was a putrefied odor in the house. And I contend that was a lot of hogwash, too, because one officer, Schultz, claims on the 18th or on the 19th that as he came into the house, we had come into the house, and my little Lhasa Apso was in the house. And, of course, he had been locked in the kitchen, all day. Well, the little puppy, he piddles, see, and while he's piddling and while he is doing his business on the paper, and that, you can imagine what it smells like if you go into a closed room. And when the heat came on, as soon as the heat came on, it'd give you, that strong feces odor. I found it as odd when we bought the house that a house with a crawl space would need a sump pump. But then I learned the first time it rained that this ground gets wet under there, and then the crawl space actually floods up to a foot deep in water. And then as it recedes, it puts out a musty odor. There was always a musty odor in that house. The subdivision where the Summerdale house is located is built on a clay field. And when it rained, the rain would come down from both ends and would flood from one house to the other. The crawl space would fill up with water. In 1976, I asked a landscaper, I said, what do you do for that sour odor of clay? And he said, spread white lime, just regular masonry lime. On the ground, he said, it'll sweeten up the clay and you won't have that odor. It's sort of like what charcoal does in filtering things. That's why the lime was spread in the crawl space.
How much lime was spread down there eventually?
I think 700 or 800 pounds of it. The rope trick is not, the way I've described the rope trick is it's nothing more than a tourniquet. And I had explained it to them. I even demonstrated it to them. It would cut off the air. So if you're going to kill somebody, you just put it on their neck and twist it 3 times or 4 times or whatever until the person stopped moving. Shoelaces, huh? You're in trouble now.
Yeah, right.
Aren't you afraid sitting that close to me? What the hell? Oh, this is too long. You don't need it this long. Okay. I had a rosary, which I carried in my pocket. I've always carried a rosary. It was my communion rosary. They said, well, what kind of a knot do you use? I said, what do you mean knot? When I tie things up? I says, depending on what I'm using it for, I said, the only thing I ever learned from Boy Scouts is a tourniquet knot. He said, well, show us what that is. So I took, at that time, and again, it's together, but in order to demonstrate it here, I took the rosary and I said, well, here, you put it around. This is hard trying to do this. Why don't you put your hand out? Okay, here. What I told him, I said, here, all you do is you wrap it around, you put one knot in it. And I said, then you put a second knot in it. Okay? Mm-hmm. I said, then you take a stick and stick it in here, and you just turn this. And I says, it causes a tourniquet. I said, that's the only knot I ever learned.